All right, we have our tobacco lit and our incense burning in the background. So we're ready to comfortably dive in here to the basics of herbal medicine, brought to you by Hollow Kelly, founder of Sanguine Rose. Now, I think a good place to start, I think it's a great transition. Sanguine. A lot of people have never heard this word. In fact, a lot of people have never heard the word apothecary, which surprises me sometimes that in a lot of communities we haven't heard of an apothecary before, unless it has to do maybe with cannabis, unfortunately. Cannabis is a great medicine, but it's unfortunate, I think, that that word has become equivalent to dispensary, which, I guess they are similar enough. But the apothecary is our herbal pharmacy. So the apothecary is where we go to get any sort of medication that comes from the land, right? Any holistic remedy comes from the apothecary. And it is a French word, as a lot of the beginning of herbalism in the West, what we call Western herbalism, is a combination of European herbal traditions and European herbalists, French herbalists, what French herbalism built as, throughout Europe and especially in France, herbalism has always had strong roots. So mixing that with Native American practices and Native American understanding of herbs is kind of how we get the idea of what we call the branch of herbalism known as Western herbalism. Western herbalism also, from my experience in school and throughout my practice, Western herbalism also kind of draws from ancient traditions, as Western herbalism isn't as much grounded in a ancient philosophy like traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, is, or Ayurvedic medicine. Also, both of these are grounded in ancient practices, right? Whereas Western herbalism is not. And that has some positives and some negatives, right? Now, some of the negatives are, of course, having a system that is built on centuries, right? Eons, of practitioners and herbalists back thousands and tens of thousands of years is huge. In fact, you could just about say that every possible remedy for just about every possible problem has been created. And when it comes to traditional Chinese medicine, that a lot of times is the case. Chinese medicine practitioners that I have met, from what I know, it's a lot of formula following, right? So it's not, I wouldn't say one size fits all, but all the different sizes and all the different variability has sort of already been discovered, right? All the terminology has been discovered, and they're matching remedies, right? Matching 50, 500 different possible remedies have already been put together. And in fact, because Chinese medicine is so huge, especially, throughout the world outside of, the Western world, there is mass production of certain capsules, certain useful medicines that are very popular within Chinese medicine. So for this reason, many Chinese medicine practitioners have this understanding to lean on. And that gives them a lot of credit, a lot of backbone, and a lot of safety, right, when it comes to working with people. There is sort of a master oracle to consult with Chinese medicine. Likewise, with Ayurveda, there is already a framework to work within. I think Ayurveda is very well known for the dosha system, right? The understanding of Pitta, Vata, and Kapha. And these doshas in Western herbalism we think of as energetics, or also as constitution. And just like the constitution, we think about it as a piece of paper that gives, a nation or a country or whatever you want to say, its baseline principles. When we think of constitution, we're actually thinking of the same basic principles that every herb has, that every human has, that every environment has. Animals have different temperaments and constitution. So it's the energy, it's the essence of the thing, right? In the most basic, fundamental way that we can think about it. In fact, this idea of being able to read somebody and know what they are more likely to need because of their temperament or constitution is a very old and deep practice, and pretty much connects all ancient medicinal or holistic practices. Even Hippocrates talks about being able to understand different temperaments in people and sort of have a intuitive understanding based on looking at somebody and understanding or feeling somebody's essence as well, of what sorts of medicines they are more likely to need. And this is so real that it's something that herbalists do today. Especially, I would say, herbalists with a lot of training and practice and experience end up finding this naturally, right? This is where that word sanguine comes in. When we think about Hippocrates and more Greek medicine systems, right? Kind of the basis of Western medicine and doctors and these types of things, right? Hippocrates is the father of modern medicine, right? But sanguine is actually a temperament. And the sanguine temperament is thought to be sort of like a perfect temperament. Sanguine means red, but it's like a brown, earthy red as far as I know. And sanguine refers to blood. So a sanguine temperament is a type that has thought to have good blood. Sanguine is warm. Sanguine is comforting and popular, attractive. So sanguine is a temperament and has been used as a word to describe in ancient times folks that have a very pristine temperament. But sanguine also means blood and red. So sanguine rose, right? It's an herbal term, also red rose, but sanguine is that perfect temperament. So it all kind of comes back together in this conversation of energetics. Doshas, right? That is a totally energetic system, a way of understanding people, medicines, and illnesses based on dosha, which is exactly that, a constitution, an energetic system. When we think of pitta, we're thinking of a hot person, right? Somebody who has a very warm temperament. When we think of vata, we're thinking of air, right? We're thinking of someone with an airy temperament, but also that dryness comes in more with vata. And when we think about kapha, we think about someone who has a more water and earth-based temperament, right? So maybe more stocky. Maybe they hold on to water more and calories more, whereas the vata person is more thin and tall and more airy, more mind-based, right? And then our pitta person is very warm, which usually has to do with muscle mass. More muscle, more heat. So we see this idea of different builds and the idea of exomorphs and endomorphs and these types of things, right? This concept is not just the physical body and its internal structures and proclivities and that types of things, but also our internal thinking. Right? So this way of reading people also has to do with, are you a creative person? Are you somebody who has bursts of energy and then is low? Are you somebody who likes to just chill out, and even when you go out, you're pretty much, a wallflower? Or are you somebody who has excellent style? Or are you somebody whose style is mostly around, comfort or durability, right? All these different things are a part of a person's constitution, and with more understanding we can see how the difference between someone who keeps their house very bare and someone who keeps their house with a lot of different things also can relate to more internal dynamics that somebody might have going on. a very hot temperament person. This energetics and temperament are so important, right? When we think of ginger, right? Ginger is a hot, dry plant. In Western energetics, or in Western herbalism, our thinking around energetics is, I would say, very simple compared to maybe something as long lasting and ancient as Ayurveda. Um, when we think about Western herbalism, we describe it as hot and cold, moist and dry. Those are the basic axes, right? That all things, all plants, people, environments illnesses are going to fall within. And that's generally the same idea when it comes to Ayurveda or Chinese medicine, is that these are the main principles that we are looking for. So an illness, say eczema, for example, a health challenge like eczema, is going to be dry and hot. So I wouldn't want to necessarily try to treat eczema with an infused oil of ginger and cayenne, right? Because ginger and cayenne are also very hot and dry. So they will likely make the problem worse. Rather, we would want to address the issue of that hot dryness with something that is the opposite, that is cold and moist, right? Cold and damp. We want to treat that pitta, fire, with a more kapha, earth and water. So marshmallow, perfect. It's a root as well, like ginger, but it is the exact opposite. It contains a lot of moisture, so perfect for dryness, whether on the skin like eczema or inside like a dry throat, right? Or a irritated respiratory tract, even irritated digestion, constipation. Marshmallow is going to be phenomenal for. Now, that would be perfect because marshmallow is both moist and cold. So you see how we kind of match those constitutions to balance each other. And creating that balance, I'm a Libra, but creating that balance is pretty much what working as an herbalist is all about. We're trying to bring the body back. We're trying to bring the body back into a state of homeostasis. And that homeostasis is the balance. And in that balance, our body works optimally. So we don't really want to create imbalance in the body. However, we naturally do. But our body is always trying to maintain a state of balance. Okay? So that is the goal of our practice as medicine practitioners, as holistic supporters, as medicine men and medicine women and medicine non-binaries, right? So that's the goal. That's what we attempt to do. Now, Western herbalism does succeed in a way that I think is really special to think about compared to Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine. Western medicine, Western herbalism is really special in the way that seems like such a new approach, right? Maybe we have 100 years, 200 years, as far as, not speaking of Native American, understanding of herbs, but more of that Western context. It is, just like the West, very new, and because of that, I would say herbalists who are in that learning philosophy end up having a lot more agency as far as what they end up blending and giving to their clients, right? Naturally, because there isn't as much of a framework that tells you what there needs to be, nor is there as many as clear understandings amongst practitioners, like say in Chinese medicine or Ayurveda. It is written in stone. It's existed so long and practitioners all subscribe to similar ideas. Whereas in Western medicine, you get a lot more variability. It becomes more of a creative space amongst herbalists. So you get a lot more originality. In fact, I would say that, in a way, every herbalist in the West, or many herbalists in the West, or who practice, this idea of Western herbalism, or who have come out of Western herbalism school, have a je ne sais quoi to them that is original in the way that the medicines they use, the way they go about it, and the experiences they have, right? Some herbalists are going to be on more of a nutritive and detox route. Others are going to be more focused on rejuvenating adrenals, and they maybe use more herbs that are more intense. Some herbalists, because of their own predispositions in their life, will gravitate towards nervous system soothing herbs, skullcap and lemon balm and lemon verbena, right? And of course, a good herbalist can mix all these things together, but there's still a certain level of independent thought, I would say, amongst Western herbalists, because there is a treasure trove of information and not nearly as much direction, right? So some herbalists are going to focus on flower essence, right? And that's going to be their main way of function. Some herbalists are going to be more dietitian focused. Some herbalists are going to be more tincture, tea focused, right? Capsule focused. Some herbalists I've met, it's all in the water. Good water. You got to have ionized or unionized or this and that and mix that with the tea, right? All these philosophies around how to practice, yet the energetic idea is still extremely important. And we think about it a lot in our Western herbalism. It is sort of the overarching rule amongst traditional Chinese medicine practitioners, Ayurvedic practitioners, as well as Western herbalist practitioners. This overarching idea is that we are truly responding to the energetic system, right, within a person, with the energetics of a plant and energetics of herbal medicine in order to treat and support energetics of illness or health challenges. That is the basic idea. So truly, I would say that the true frame, the true philosophy is one of working with energetics and energetically, rather than subscribing to this or that or this. I think in our time, and for myself, we pull from all places. I also enjoy that about the idea of Western herbalism, is that we do draw from everything. I'm from the Caribbean, right? So I draw from my Caribbean roots as well. But Western herbalism has given a connection to Ayurvedic herbs and a connection to more Asian herbs, right? Because within the materia medica, which is a word you will hear a lot within our classes, which is basically our medical material of our herbs, right? So that's our pharmacy, our materia medica. And within our materia medica, we do have Chinese herbs. We do have herbs that are specifically Chinese herbs, right? Things like Schisandra berry, things like Angelica, Dong Quai, right? All kinds of Chinese herbs that are used very often in Western medicine. And same with Ayurveda. We have Shatavari, right? We have Gotu Kola, you know what I mean? And we also have a very popular one. What is it? Not Shatavari. Oh, the holiest of them all, the holy basil, right? We do. So that's a beautiful part about Western herbalism, is we do end up connecting with these other traditions, as well as ones that aren't as common in Western herbalism, but it gives us that freedom to explore and to find our own philosophy of work. It's not so confining and boxing, which can be a challenge for many herbalists, right? It would be very supportive, I would say, to be an herbalist that has, a clear point of reference, because in herbalist books often, right, there are many ways that we could go about supporting somebody's health. There are many herbs that are going to be helpful for the same thing. There are going to be many moist herbs and dry herbs and hot herbs and cold herbs. So how do you know which one to pick, right? You go through a any herbal literature, and it's going to give you several herbs from across the globe, right? Across the continent, at least, that would be helpful for this person and might be perfect fits. So, how do we go about choosing herbs, especially in a time where we have access to everything, right? It was easier when, our societies or our cultures only had, 55 specific herbs that we work with in our tribe, right? That's a lot easier. And, I've heard stories, anecdotes that herbalists in the ancient world were actually a lot better at working with 20 herbs, and they could get everything accomplished with 10 that maybe herbalists today need 100 herbs to work with, because instead of using those herbs or working with those herbs with our fullest understanding of how to pair them with other plants and when to work with them, we more pigeonhole, right, the whole world of herbs and feel like we need all of them because we only know one property of each herb, rather than in the past knowing all 15 properties of each herb within our materia medica. So the way that we end up choosing at this time is very much based on energetics, right? We need to clearly be able to read people, health challenges, and herbs, and have such a good understanding of these three ideas that we're able to create a blend that pretty much meets the person's self, right? As that medicine, that remedy, that is actually its goal, is to bring somebody back into their self, right? Back to their balance. So in a way, we are creating a remedy that meets that person and provides for them, whether it's a flavor, a time, a certain, a spirit that is supportive. We are creating, in the apothecary, we are creating an ally. Think about like our herbs, when we put a blend together, we're sort of putting together the organs of our own healing doll, right? Voodoo dolls, right, have had a ton to do with healing, right? In our modern day, we see, voodoo dolls is Hollywood freak things, right? But the ancestral idea of a voodoo doll, it contains medicine and it replicates a person, right? It is a mirror of a client, because healing is happening on that doll. Of course, the thing could be turned aggressive and violent, and now we're trying to harm a doll that is a reflection of somebody. But the original idea is, hey, we're going to create this reflection of you, and through doing healing psychic work on that doll, it will now transfer to the person who is connected to it. So in the same way, when we make herbal medicine, when we are at the herb counter, when we are working with our beakers and tincture and our mark and our menstruum and all these beautiful herbal words that we will dive into in courses to come, so stay tuned, what we are really working to do is reunite a person with their self so that they can find a genuine state of balance. So that is the important of understanding energetics of plants, people, environments, and illnesses. It is truly an ancient practice and one that we all grow in constantly throughout our life, every practice we have. And in fact, you are already intuitively doing this with people that you meet. When we think about reading the room or getting a good vibe or a bad vibe from a person, we are doing this effectively. In fact, our systems, our internal psyche is always looking for signs of health and signs of sickness, right? In people. We are biologically programmed to do this. So when we talk about reading energetics of people, right? This is the primal herbalist. This is the animal within the herbalist, which is essential. That animal is truly the grandmother of herbal medicine, is the creature, the original state of human beings, as herbal medicine is as old as a human being. It's as old as the human family, right? It's as old as the most ancient human. So being in our most primal form, what we really are able to do is energetically see what we need, feel our bodies, energetically see what others need, feel their bodies, right? Feel what they're needing for support, and also be able to view the world around us that is made up of so many medicinal plants and see them almost in a sixth sense way where we're able to perceive their energies, right? When we think about how this great idea of herbal medicine the world over came to exist, there's a lot of theories on it, right? One of the theories is that human beings tried and tasted every single thing, sometimes dying, sometimes living, until we knew what was what. And there's a level of obviousness to that. I'm sure there was a level of trial and error, and people have died from eating the wrong thing and been healed from eating the right thing, of course. But was it that random, right? Because if it was, we would think that, hey, if a community was sick, man, they'd probably all die off if that remedy hadn't been discovered yet. But just like language, right? The discovery of language. How was language discovered? Did people just make up noises until, they discovered perfect, this perfect system? You know what I mean? It's hard to say how these things were invented. And I would say that it points to a deeper intrinsic knowledge that human beings, at one point, with our blankness to our world, our blankness to our mind, there was a time when we were able to connect with this. And it's still within us. It's something that we don't have to tap in so often to, as we have only more and more information from the human family to stand upon. And in a way, it makes us more powerful. And in a way, it makes us inferior, because we're not able to, say, tap into these sixth sense abilities the same way that our ancestors were. But that's what I believe as far as how herbal medicine was first discovered. It was through a natural intrinsic understanding of energetics, and mostly being able to see, connect, touch, feel, smell, taste slightly, to understand what was medicine, food, and poison. Think about it this way. We don't need to necessarily consume a poisonous amount of a poisonous plant to know that it is poisonous, right? We can observe the plant, maybe there's a smell of the plant, maybe there are other cues. And in that way, the same can be said with energetics of people. We don't necessarily have to go through a whole challenging experience to understand that maybe this isn't the person that I would want to go through challenges with, right? There are other cues and other signs that both people, environments, illnesses, and medicine show us without having to, digest it fully, per se. So that's a good background of energetics. In our next class, we'll see what we dive into, but I'm thinking that we will be diving into medicine making, as making the medicine is absolutely fundamental to supporting the health. Cheers. Until the next time, have yourself a cup of tea.